In this video, I asked my friend Roloff, who is the head mix coach in our paid programs here, to show you his techniques for getting more power and impact in his mixes. And this is something you can certainly hear in his work. And I love this because it's not another video about frequencies or attack and release times. It's about enhancing the energy of a song and how it hits the end listener. And it's really about becoming more of an artist rather than just a technician when you mix. Enjoy.
Your mix sounds weak. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes you have these mixes, right? Where it's just, you have the EQ, the compression, the volume bottoms, pretty much everything dialed in like as you would normally have it. And it sounds good, but for some reason you feel like something is missing, right? It's still not as powerful or as punchy as you would like it to sound. But you just can't really put your finger on what exactly is missing and why it's not sounding as powerful as you want it. I've been in that situation myself many times, right? And over the years, I've discovered a couple things, and there's 3 big tricks that I want to share with you guys in this video that I've been using to beef up my mixes. And to just get that extra impact and punch in the sound, especially on very specific moments in the song. I have this song pulled up here. It's by Nouri Yetgin. He's the guitar player for Distant, their Dutch deathcore band. If you're not familiar with them, definitely check them out. This is one of his solo projects, and I have the final mix printed down, especially this breakdown section. So we have a build-up section towards the breakdown, then we have the first half, and then the second half of this breakdown. And I'm gonna play this for you, and I want you to specifically listen for like the overall kind of energy and like size in the mix. And specifically like how it's just gradually increasing the further we get into this breakdown. So this first build-up section will sound like relatively small, and then the first half of the breakdown will sound bigger, and then the second half I'm trying to go all out and just maximize the impact and the size and all these words, right, of this mix. So I want you to listen for that specifically when I play this part here. Alright, and now obviously Nouri is an expert in writing breakdowns, alright? This is just absolutely massive, and the way that the song is written, it's already just big, right? But there's also a ton of like behind the scenes things happening in the mixing of this section here that I want to show you that is just really contributing to making this breakdown sound as big as it does right now. And what I've done, I've pulled up the actual Pro Tools session here, and I've basically undone, like I bypassed the 3 big tricks here. And now we're gonna play to the same section again with these 3 tricks bypassed. And what I want you to listen for now is how the energy throughout these 3 different sections stays very flat. Like there's almost no growth anymore when we go into the breakdown, and even the second half, even though, you know, you still have these double kick things happening and everything, the energy and the size is just the exact same as the build-up. So listen for that when I play the same section for you again. So as you can see, the energy, like movement and just the breakdowns, they don't hit as hard. There's no extra weight to the breakdown anymore compared to the build-up. And so there's a couple things happening behind the scene. And by the way, if this is not your genre, that's totally fine. Later in the video, after I explain these 3 tricks, I will also show you how I applied them in rock mixes as well that are not this heavy. So let's dive into this first trick here. And the first trick is basically just good old volume automation. And specifically volume automation with the goal of creating more punch in mind. So specifically on the drums, I'm doing a lot of volume automation with that in mind, as well as the other instruments. But let's dive into the drums first. I'll just engage the volume automation really quick here. and I'll show you what I've done. So first the kick, as you can see later in the session, this is basically the baseline volume, right? This is my regular static mix volume, and from that I'm automating kick the kick up and down depending on the section of the song. And as you can see in this build-up section, the kick volume is just that baseline volume. It's not any louder or whatsoever. Then we go into this breakdown, and first off, I just got all of these kicks like 1 dB up, but especially this first one, I automated that another couple dB up so that it's really like that first hit of the breakdown is just boom in your face. I really want that kick to take a big step forward and just punch you in the face, like kind of literally. So listen for that when we play this section with the automation bypassed first. And then once more with the automation engaged. So it is fairly subtle, but it's definitely noticeable that that kick is just taking a big step forward. Let's just exaggerate that a little bit so that you can really hear what it's doing there. That was way too much, right? The kick just took like 5 steps forward, which is a little bit too much, over the top, but this is basically the sweet spot. Same thing there. As soon as we go into like the second round, I guess the first kick is just a couple dBs louder again. And then especially here, the second half with these double kicks, I'm automating these even further up so that it really becomes like over the top awesome right there, right? Same thing for the snare. Again, I'm just having this baseline volume that I'm automating from, I guess. And the build-up section is just that baseline volume. And then as soon as we go into the breakdown, these snares come up by like 2 dB or something, and then an extra dB in that second half. Listen for that specifically, the snare volume increasing here. Exactly in the last half, the snare just really takes another big step forward, right? It becomes really in your face, which is what I want. Similar thing is happening with the cymbals. Same thing, just a baseline volume, which I'm automating from. And then in this particular breakdown, the build-up, it's just baseline volume for the build-up. And then that first crash is one of the most crucial things here that I wanted to point out, because this is a double crash, I think. Yeah, so it's like a crash and a China, and then he just goes to riding on the China. But I really want that first double hit to be as big as it can, really to just create that massive explosion on that first hit of the breakdown. And if we just keep it stagnant like this, it's just super boring. There's no like real growth or anything, but if we have here, if we have it automated, you just notice how that first crash is just really louder and it's just creating a big sense of explosion there. Same thing here again in the second half. The drummer is kind of following the machine gun kick drums with this ride cymbal in this case. And again, I'm just automating that up. So just by having these first hits of a new bar and like the first kick here, by having these hits a little bit louder, you can really create more punch. And I will do this exactly the same as you can see here on like different moments in the song. Maybe it's like a new verse or like a chorus that comes in. I'll just have these first kick hits up and the first crash hits as well, so that you really just create these big kind of explosion moments. Then we also have bass guitar automation, which is very subtle. It's just the bass guitar is 1 dB louder in the second half of that breakdown, but it's just to fill out the low end a little bit more. Similar thing happening with the guitars here. During the build-up section is just the baseline volume again. First half of the breakdown, I'm bringing the guitars up by 1 dB maybe, and the second half, this is actually kind of interesting, I'm bringing the guitars down a little bit, except for these little notes here. I'll play this section here. Let's see that again. So it's just the over here, the second half of the breakdown. I brought these guitars down because I really wanted to focus to be on these massive kick hits that I've brought up just now. And so I'm totally cool to have the guitars go down a little bit, but then these higher notes were not really cutting through anymore, so I just automated those back up there. Same thing over there, just these high notes that are just coming up a little bit. So as you can see, with just the volume automation dialed in, we're already getting a little bit closer to this actual final mix, but there's still 2 tricks left that I want to show you guys. Alright, that brings us to the second trick, which is using samples to create more anticipation and just to build tension, and also to maximize impact and just punch on specific moments in the song. And I'm not specifically talking about drum samples in this case, but I'm talking more, I guess you could call them like production samples, sound samples, I don't know. But in this case, I'm talking about a very big snare bomb sample, and I have a couple more here. I've got an FX swell, I've got an impact sample, and a double crash. And I'll show you how I apply these in this specific breakdown. Let's check out the snare first. So I'll show you what this sample sounds like in solo. It's basically just a big reverb bomb here. It's just nothing else but reverb, and I'm just throwing that below the snare here. Let me play you this little section of the breakdown without that reverb first, and then I'll throw it in. Let's hear it again with the reverb. So as you can see, the snare reverb bomb is just basically giving the entire mix like a massive sense of like, you know, ambience and space around it, which I really, really like. And I'll throw this kind of sample on in different sections of the song, specifically bigger breakdowns and stuff like that. So that is one thing. The other samples that I'm using here are a swell sample, which sounds like this. This is just basically meant to, I don't want this to be super audible in the mix, but I kind of want this to create a sense of like tension, like the listener can kind of feel that something is coming up, right? So if you play this transition between the build-up and the breakdown without this sample here, I mean, you kind of feel that something is coming up, but with this sample here, it's like you really create some like anticipation for like, oh, what's gonna happen, right? And then of course you build that anticipation, and so you also gotta have some sort of like a release of that, which in this case I'm using a pretty big like impact sample for that. This is what that sounds like. It's just a big bomb, and you can find all of these samples just online on like websites that have like free sample downloads, whatever. So just Google them and you will definitely be able to find something that approximates this. But this is basically what these two samples sound like together. And if we play that in the mix, notice how just that entire transition is just completely transformed right now from kind of boring and flat like this to much more impactful like this. Especially that hard hit here. This is just making a ton of impact on that first hit of the breakdown there. To further like double down on that, I also have this double crash sample. I guess I just printed this down from like one of the drum libraries, just a double crash. I'm just throwing this in here to create more like top end energy, because right now most of these things and the kicks and everything, they're mostly located in the low end, but I also want the top end to have more energy. And so I just drop in these crash samples again, just on various places throughout the mix, to just give me more of like an explosion and like an like you're announcing the new section of the song a little bit more obviously. Check this out. Listen for this sample here, the crash. And without, it's just not as good. It's still okay, right? But with this crash, it's just another 1% thing that really pushes this thing to the max a little bit further. And then when we go into the second half of the breakdown, I have just a slightly different sample here. But it serves the exact same purpose. So let's hear that in the mix. It's just, again, just creating a bigger punch and a bigger hit on the first hit of that new breakdown half. Yeah, so using these samples here, let's mute them all and listen to this this transition one more time. And let's engage all of them and listen to this one more time. Just tons more impact like that. Alright, let's go into the third trick now, which is basically using synthesizers to beef up your bass guitar and your rhythm guitars specifically. So I have the couple synthesizers here. I just have these sitting in my mix template, so I just pull them up wherever. In this case, I'm kind of lucky because we're using a MIDI bass in this particular song, so I can just easily copy the MIDI over to these synthesizers. But even if we're just using a regular bass, what I try to do is just draw in the MIDI here for like the root notes of the melodies here. Let me just play all these synths one by one and tell you kind of what purpose they serve. First up is a guitar synth, and I'm using this synth to beef up the guitars, obviously, right? I'll show you what it sounds like, and beware that this is not sounding very pretty, but that's also not really the goal. I don't care what this thing sounds like in solo, but I really care what it sounds like in combination with the actual guitar. So listen for what it sounds like in solo. This is kind of weird, right? Just kind of like low-endy, farty, kind of distorted kind of synthesizer sound. But in combination with the rhythm guitars, which sound like this. Let me play this with the synth now together so that you can really hear what it's doing. All right, let's hear that again without. And with. So I wouldn't have it this loud in the mix, but let me see. Here we go. Undo. Yeah, here we go. But I'm basically just looking for like a bigger, lower mid-range, beefy kind of sound, which is exactly doing what it should. So that's the first thing that I'm doing. So let's hear this in the second half of this breakdown. I'll first play it without, and then I'll unmute it. Now again, with the synth engaged. So it's very, very subtle, right? Which is definitely the goal. I don't want this synthesizer to be kind of like heard, like you can really like hear it, you know? I just wanted to make it feel as if the guitars sound bigger, which is doing exactly that. Secondly, I have this stereo bass. This is on a very similar idea as that guitar synth. I'm just looking for like more low end, but then specifically on the sides of the mix. So not necessarily just in the center, but listen to what this synth sounds like. Hopefully you were listening to that with like a subwoofer or at least on like monitors or something, because if you're watching this video on your phone, you probably have missed that. But this is basically just very wide sounding sub-low end. So I'm using the ANA2 synth for this one. It's the Hold for Webs preset in case you're interested in that. And I'm just boosting a ton of sub-low end, specifically on the sides only, on like the left and right part of the sound. And if we play this in combination with our bass guitar, I'll just play our bass guitar in solo first. And now with that synth engaged as well. Let me play this again, but then just have the synth super loud. it just really beefs up that low end, right? Specifically in the full mix. Let me play this section again with the synth engaged. And I really like how it's just making the whole low end sound as if it's super wide and not just in the center focused. I'm definitely familiar with that. If you're mastering a song for vinyl, you do not want this stuff to be stereo, right? You want all of your low end to be mono for sure. But in this case, this song was only uploaded to Spotify, and it's absolutely cool to have stereo low end going on there. Last but not least, I also have this basically like a distorted 808 synth going on as well. This is what that one sounds like. It's for a similar goal, just making the low end even more massive. So if we play all three of these synths combined, which is happening in the second half of the breakdown here, this is what that sounds like. So it's really just meant to beef up the bass guitar, the rhythm guitars. Let's put these in as well and see what that sounds like. So yeah, I really love how that sounds and how it just really beefs up the bass guitar and the rhythm guitars, makes them sound massive. And then of course, if you throw these samples on top of that, as well as the well-automated drums, then yeah, you can see how all these little things by themselves don't even make a ton of impact, but if you start stacking them on top of each other, then all of these little things combined are just really the result between that the version of the breakdown that has tons of movement and tons of growth throughout the breakdown versus the super flat sounding version which we started with. And so what I've done, I've printed down the version of this breakdown that had none of these three tricks applied. So no automation, no samples, and no synthesizers. And then we have the actual printed mix that we've just been working on. Let's compare them one more time. Alright, now let's check out the version that has the three tricks applied. And as I promised in the beginning of the video, this doesn't only apply to the super heavy breakdowns in deathcore genres like this. I've actually pulled up two other songs in rock genres that I've mixed as well, and where I'm using the exact same principles here. So this is a rock song, and this is the transition between the pre-chorus and the chorus. And now that you know what's going on behind the scenes, I want you to listen for that effects swell sample that I've put in there, as well as that double crash sample, as well as the first kick hit that I've automated to come up right when the chorus kicks in, right? So listen for that. Here we go. You don't know anything you don't know anything about me. Play that again. Hopefully you can hear that effect swell, the double crash, and the kick hit coming up there. You don't know anything you don't know anything about me. And here's another example of a rock song. And again, I'm just applying the exact same stuff here, just a little bit more subtle maybe. So here's another one. Again, notice the effect swell, the double crash. We lost, but it's getting there. So it's definitely way more subtle in these rock examples here, but it's doing the same thing, right? It's just making a transition that otherwise would have been super flat and just boring, and just adding some extra impact and punch to these crucial, like, transitional moments in the song here. We lost, but it's getting there. I know it's wrong, I know, but All right, so I hope you guys dig this, and I hope you can use this in your mixes as well to just create a little bit more impact and just more like movement, especially when you transition from like a smaller section in a song to something that is supposed to be bigger, like a breakdown and like a chorus. But make sure you have a completely flat frequency response in your room before you start applying any of this. Otherwise, it just won't work, right? Or will it? Check out my thoughts about that subject in this video right here, and I'll see you in the next one.